Okay, so we will be reviewing Accountable Software Forms Printer today. My name is Andrew Collins. I'm a consultant here at IBIS Inc. And so let's go ahead and get going. What we will really be covering today is a little more advanced use of Forms Printer for GP. This is once you have installed Forms Printer and you have the reports created, then how you can really maximize using those reports within GP. You'll see there are a lot of different tools we can use to really customize your own Forms Printer experience. So we'll start out with just some benefits of Forms Printer, and then we'll go into designing the SSRS reports that will be used. Forms Printer can use either SSRS reports or Crystal reports, and if you use a combination of the two, Forms Printer is actually able to use both at the same time. So if you set it up to use SSRS reports and Crystal reports, you can actually decide which time you pull from which report. So if you use both, it does have the ability to do that. We'll go over very quickly deploying the SSRS reports, and then the real focus of this will be assigning the SSRS reports. So we'll just be going over quickly what would be done beforehand, and then really get into how, once the reports are created, what you can do within GP to get those going. So you see when you assign your SSRS reports, you can do it by format, which is the actual just form of the report. You can do it by type ID. In GP, you have the type IDs for sales order processing. You can actually do by each type ID have a different form assigned. You can go by class ID. This is if you have vendor classes or customer classes. You can use the class ID to decide which form you're going to use. And then finally, you can go all the way to a master ID. This would be the actual vendor or the actual customer. So you can get as specific as you need to be. If you need one customer who has a different form from everyone else, you can go ahead and drive it all the way down to that level. So you see some of the very basic benefits of Forms Printer is that it can print purchase order processing, sales order processing, and receivables management forms. It, at the very beginning, was created just to have sales order processing. It has recently added purchase order processing and receivables management. These are some of the newer features and can really be used, really maximize what you do out of GP. There are available Forms Printer templates for the vast majority of the forms that you can print. So as soon as you install Forms Printer, a folder is actually created with these templates. So you can really jump right out of the gun if you need to use something quickly. And then once you have more time to go in and really customize, you can go in and change those later to really fit your specific needs. But anytime you need to do something quickly, there are templates available for that. Out of Forms Printer within GP, you can print, save, or email your forms automatically. So this is once you set it up. Every time you print, you can either send it directly to a printer, and you can set exactly which printer, or it can ask every time. You can save whatever's printed as a file. So if you have a file location, and then you want to go back later and distribute them at your own pace, you can do that. Or you can go ahead and email them just as soon as you click print, and go ahead and send it out to either your vendors or your customers, depending on what form you're printing. This can be done using PDF files. It can export it to images, or it can also send them to Microsoft Excel. This can just be a general Excel workbook, or you can use the CSV files. And then anytime you set it up to use email, you will need Microsoft Outlook set up on the same computer that you are emailing from, and you'll assign whichever Outlook account you're going to use. As I mentioned before, it does use SSRS reports and Crystal reports. And one of the big benefits for Forms Printer is you can avoid multiple GP dictionaries, report dictionaries. This can really cause issues if you have multiple workstations or multiple terminal servers. This allows you to just keep the same basic report dictionaries, and you don't have to risk getting your dictionaries out of sync. This way, everyone can continue using the same forms that they always have and easily begin using any of the Forms Printer forms that are set up. So I'll start quickly by just how you would design your SSRS reports. What you would use is Microsoft Visual Studio. The examples you'll see later in this I created with Visual Studio 2008 and then uploaded to my own report server. And when you're creating these reports within Visual Studio, you can create multiple formats, and it can be as specific as different information across each form. So if some customers, it's very important that they see their payment terms or possibly the delivery delivery method you'll be using, you can have that on there. And then if others it's not very important, you don't need to include that information at all. Or if you operate two different companies within one GP database, you can actually just design it to use different images. So if you have, let's say, a customer class set up for one company and another class for the second company of customers, then you can just use different images across the top. So it's customized to each company that they think they're buying from. You could also drive this by the type ID, which I've actually set up before at a client. They used one type ID when they were selling from one company and a second type ID when they were selling from another. This allowed each company's image to appear in the header, and it looked as if they were operating out of two different databases when in fact there was only one. If you want to just use one format, what you can actually do is just toggle information on every report. So this gets a little more complicated. Instead of having two formats that are completely separate, and when you have one situation you use the first and a second situation you use the second, you can actually just use the one format every single time and toggle your information based on what is seen from GP. So a second customer we saw, they would toggle images using the same report. So instead of using two different reports for each set of customers, they would just use one report for everyone with two images on it. And if you operate with multiple currency IDs, you can actually change messages to possibly be more specific to the whichever company or whichever country is using the currency ID that is being printed. So once the SSRS reports have been created, you'll need to deploy them to your report server. So this is just a quick sample of my report server that I used to create these. And you see, once I created them, I just uploaded them, and you have them. I always keep them in a Forms Printer folder, and this is where you would set Forms Printer to connect to and pull all the reports from as you printed. So now once you have created and deployed all your reports, everything else is done within GP. From this point forward, anyone who is assigned as the Forms Printer admin could come in and make these required changes. So once you are in GP and you're setting up the Forms Printer, you need to connect it to the report server. So this is very simple. You just have the report server location, and what this is doing is pointing towards the report server that I just showed you. So this would point to my report server. If you have a report server set up for your company, this would obviously point to yours. Once this is set up, then you will see you can connect to each of these reports, and it will pull all the available reports that you have loaded, and you can set them up according to class, master ID, or just by company. So this is once it's set up, this is where it really gets into the customization. So you see you can assign different reports based on company. So in this one I have the Fabricam test company, and then I just set up a second new test company just to show you that you can drive from multiple companies. And then within each company, you can set up by class ID, type ID, and master ID. In this case, I just set up using the one sales order processing format. So you see within the Fabricam company, I want to use, say, one report for Australian customers and a second report for New Zealand customers. I have these set up as customer classes. So the planning was done ahead to drive the reports that will be used by customer class. So under each customer class, it is assigned to a different report path. If you'll see in the top right of the window, I've selected to use SQL Reporting, and then assign the report path. So while the Australian customers are using one format, the New Zealand customers would be using another. And then the same setup was done under the document type ID. So anytime I want to use the standard invoice, so you see there the STDINV, or it will use the basic invoice that I have deployed to the report server. But if I want to use the special invoice, maybe there are government contracts. That's been a situation we've come across in the past. You'll have different information on the specialized invoice format, and you just assign it to that type ID. Anytime you print that type ID, it will automatically go in and pull the correct format, and there's no additional steps added for the end user. And let's say there's one customer who, they're one of your larger customers, and they've requested a specific invoice format. You can create that one format to their liking and assign it just to that customer. So if that customer has an invoice printed for it, then it will use that format, and it will go ahead and bypass all of the previous setup. So it will first look at the company, and then look at the class, then the type, and then the customer. So if this customer did exist in either the Australian customers or the New Zealand customers customer class, this would be overridden, and it would be printed using the assigned form. So once that's done, all you have to do is go in and print your SSRs reports. So anytime after that setup has been completed, when someone prints out of sales order processing, it will immediately drive back to the report server and pull the report that's been assigned. So you see, this was the very basic format that I used for the first one, just the company in general. And this is really driven by the templates that were available. The quick changes I made, I just changed the logo at the top because I wanted to show the IBIS logo. And the coloring at the header, I just made it so it looks more like the IBIS color scheme. And it was very quick. This took, maybe 2 hours to get it on, everything set up. And then once you got it printed, it's moving forward out of GP. So now if you want to get a little more, use the second company I was saying out of the same database, and you just want to drive a different logo. That's all you have to do. Again, I just changed the logo at the top and the coloring of the header. So it looks much more customized to accountable as opposed to IBIS, even though it could very well be printing out of the same company database. And you see in this one I also added some footer information, just a thank you note to the customer, so you can customize them to that extent as well. And now this is one more. If you see, I just completely changed some of the information. So you see, in this case, the payment terms are pulling in as net 30. And down at the bottom, this is actually an interactive message driven by what payment terms are selected. So if you have multiple payment terms, they can actually give the correct number of days down at the bottom. And if you have, say, discounts available at some point in the payment terms window, that can be incorporated as well. So this can go from very basic to very complex depending on what needs your company faces. So now moving towards some of the more complex, these are some things that you can use with maximizing Forms Printer, or to really maximize your Forms Printer. The first is to script email messages for customers. What this will do is if you have Forms Printer set up to email automatically, it will actually look into the customer's information and really drive the email message to be specific for this customer. So it can use their customer ID if you need to give them information on how they should properly pay. It can use their customer name or even their contact person to make it seem more personalized for each customer. And it can rename the actual email that's being sent, the attachment that goes along with it, and like I said, anything in the body. Once this is scripted the first time, and this would be done at the Forms Printer setup window that we reviewed earlier, it automatically pulls in every time it's printed. There's no additional step for the end user or whoever is in charge of printing and sending the invoices. One of the newer things is the ability to print purchase order processing forms on a per vendor basis. This is only available in the newest version of Forms Printer. So anytime you do look at Forms Printer, you will want to make sure that you have the newest version possible for your GP. Every year they're coming out with new, just one or two upgrades each time, and they're all very useful. And the big thing for this is you can include all third-party software information. So anything that is stored in your SQL database and used with GP can be pulled in to the SSRS reports and then used on the Forms Printer that is printing Forms Printer that's printing out of GP. So it doesn't have to be your very basic GP. It can actually pull in anything that is connected to that database. This is some of the big limitations on the report writer, which is basic within GP. It has to be one of the basic GP fields, but with Forms Printer you can pull in anything that's connected. Okay, well, like I said, if anything comes to mind after the call is over, please email info@ibisync.com and they will get you in touch with someone who can help answer that question. So thank you for calling and listening today. I hope Forms Printer can be a solution that you use in the future.